Hi everyone, this is Mr. By Kiefler, and today we're talking about performing heightened text and punctuation. So in the previous video to this, we talked about periods, exclamation marks, and question marks. But today, we're going to talk about commas, semicolons, colons. We'll also talk about O as a technical punctuation, and then briefly touch on things like parentheses, that's brackets for some of you. We'll also talk about hyphens, dashes, that kind of thing. Quotation marks really shouldn't show up, but we'll talk about them if we can. So, as I said in all previous videos, we're making sure we understand how to use vocabulary in terms unique to theater, but these are also relevant to English class in the case of punctuation. Really to any reading that you do, it'll be very helpful. We're also talking about how we utilize rehearsal experiences to improve stage performances. So again, it's super important that we recognize that this is rehearsal, part of this work. This is your book. And back to the role of the actor's book, we're going to explain and apply the use of the actor's book to help with the complexity of rule. Again, super important that you're doing this work for text, especially heightened text in the theater, but it's going to add to the nuance of your performance and in a lot of ways make your text seem simpler than you realize. Those moments where you go, what is going on? Especially punctuation is going to help with that. And of course, finally, the real world connections. It's going to help you understand poetic and heightened text. Your analysis of any text is going to be improved, especially with this punctuation, and your ability to write will also be improved. So, in the last video with exclamation marks, sentences, and question marks, we were focused on Eminem and his first part of his song, Lose Yourself, focused on this question mark, noting that there was no other punctuation in this. And I said you could put punctuation in here, but we're just going to skip to his next verse to look at that punctuation. So, the first piece of punctuation we're going to focus on is the comma. So, the comma is helping clarify or create a list. So, in this case, his palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy. It's doing both of those things, clarifying and creating a list. It's telling you the state of this person who is Eminem or Marshall Mathers in this case and how he's feeling. His palms are sweaty, his knees weak, his arms are heavy. So it's creating like a grocery list of how he's feeling. And when you get to all those commas, the comma is kind of like you saying to the audience, and you could replace a comma with this, you see. And this is not you see with a question mark. It is not a question mark. It's an explanation or a clarification. Like, Mondays are the first day of the work week. You see, because that's when I start work. It's not, you see, like you understand? It's, you see, that's when I start work. So replacing that with you see, again, to clarify. You could, again, this phrase is something that I suggest you use, but if you can think of a different phrase that allows you to clarify, that's totally fine. So again, his palms are sweaty, you see. Knees weak, you see. Arms are heavy. And from the last video, we know that the most important word is heavy in this statement because it's the end of the sentence. It's what we're driving towards. And so each of these little commas are like a little skip, a clarification. And if we're talking about driving on the road, you could almost say it's a little gear change. You're revving up. Every time you're building a list, every idea gets more and more and more important. And so those commas really help you perform the importance. That doesn't mean that you have to get louder. It doesn't mean you have to get higher or lower pitched per se. It means you have to interpret how you can create more importance. That actually might mean getting quieter and simpler. Okay, so Eminem's piece only has commas, periods, and exclamation marks in it. So we're going to move forward into the Shakespeare. But this is the kind of work that we're going to be doing, and you'll see how commas, evolve into semicolons and colons, and then we'll also talk about a couple other things. So coming back to here, we have a comma, but soft. Now we know from previous videos, again, if you haven't watched those, I'd encourage you to check them out. But soft. There's a reversal happening. Romeo's saying, but, forget about this thing that just happened up here, but, you see, be quiet. Soft means be quiet. But you see, soft. And he's driving towards the idea of being quiet because the idea has this exclamation mark, which is the roadmap. But you see, soft. So replacing that. It is the East. You see? He's saying, you see, I'm making a metaphor here. And Juliet is the sun. And what's more important to him? The East, which is the window with the light breaks through, or is Juliet more important? Well, we know that Juliet's more important because she comes at the end of the sentence. Juliet is the sun. And not only is Juliet important, but the idea of her being the sun is going to be important because, frankly, my friends, throughout this whole piece, that's what Romeo is talking about. He uses that metaphor the entire time. So, commas standing for you see. Let's see if there's a place where... Oh, okay. This sentence is great, I think we've actually talked about in a previous video. This sentence is great because there are so many commas in it. Arise, you see. Fair sun, you see. He's clarifying that she's the sun again. And kill the envious moon, you see, who is already sick and pale with grief. You see that thou, her maid, art far more fair than she. Now, we get to a colon. We'll talk about that in a second. Technically, you could say that's the end of the idea, but it's not because of what colons do. So the idea continues to build, and it's compared. That thou, her maid, art far more fair than she. Be not her maid, you see, since she is envious. Same thing with a semicolon. It's just going to build the idea up. Her vestal livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Cast it off. So he's starting all the way up here, going all the way down there, to the idea of take off the moon's livery, which is the clothes or the adornments that the moon gives to you. And in this case, he's basically telling her to come out of hiding. The adornments that moon gives us is, one interpretation could be, well, because when the night shows up and the moon comes out, we adorn ourselves. Our livery is our bedrooms, is our place of hiding, our curtains. And he's saying, open your curtains, come out of your bedroom. I want to see you. And what happens is, she does. It is my lady, it is my love. She walks out of her bedroom onto the balcony, the famous balcony scene. So again, one of the things that I love about that is that those commas really drive towards that idea, and they get it excited, and it's like, no car has that many gears to change between, but when you get to commas, there's a huge gear changes. So let's stay inside of this text and talk about semicolons. So we're going to divide this like it's two sentences, even though it's one sentence here. And we're going to focus on the semicolon. A semicolon connects two ideas that are similar, but they're not connected. They make sense by themselves. So be not her maid since she is envious. That makes sense by itself. Don't be the servant to somebody who's envious of you. That makes sense. And then also, her vestal livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Cast it off. That makes sense by itself. The clothes that she makes you wear are gross and green, which in this case is an insult, and only fools or idiots or silly people would wear that kind of clothing. Take it off. That makes a lot of sense. It also makes sense that Romeo's asking her to do that because he's really attracted to her, whether that's appropriate or not in this context. But if you connect them together, be not her maid since she is envious. Well, we know that at the end of that idea, envious is the main idea because it's the end of that phrase or that main point. But instead of putting a period there, he puts a semicolon because he wants to connect these ideas. And that's where I'm saying, one, a semicolon acts as, and this is where it's really important, a semicolon, this is how I think about it anyway, acts as a period. Oh, let's make this smaller so we can follow along. It acts as a period, and it acts as a comma. So it's kind of like saying, since she is envious, that's it. You see, or the simpler way to say it is, furthermore. So instead of saying, that's it, you see, say furthermore, which is to say, there is furthermore to this idea. There's more to talk about. She is envious. You could even say, I'll prove it. Be not her maid since she is envious. I'll prove it. Her vestal livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Cast it off. And then the whole thing, and that's why there's only one period here, is that the whole thing drives towards that period. So you can replace a semicolon with furthermore or therefore. You could replace it with therefore as well. Like I said, in some cases you can replace it with I'll prove it. because it's justifying the previous idea. Yeah, so that's how you use a semicolon. It functions as both a period and a comma at the same time. And it connects two ideas. So just to be clear, it connected this idea and this idea into one idea. Now, again, this is actually an even bigger idea than we thought before. So and that's part of what's really awesome about this is we have this colon. This colon here. Arise, you see, fair sun, you see, and kill the envious moon, you see, who is already sick and pale with grief, you see, that thou her maid art far more fair than she. So what's happening with this main idea? Well, listen, come out and kill the moon because the moon is sick and pale with grief because you're more beautiful than she is. And the colon is like saying, now listen. And you'll notice something in there. In this phrase, now listen, there's a comma and a period built in. But it's not happening at the same time. Now, listen is because of all that. Now, listen to all of this. And this is where a colon is different than a semicolon. Where a semicolon connects two similar thoughts, a colon connects two thoughts that one depends on the other. And so we need this main thought in order to clarify the second thought. Kill the envious moon who is already sick and pale with grief that thou her maid art far more fair than she. We need this second phrase in order to understand this. Thou her maid art far more... Well, we need to prove it. This is the real prove it. So listen to this. She's envious. Her vestal livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. So take it off. So whenever you get to a colon, you're going to replace that colon with the phrase, now listen. And one of my favorite examples of this is when you get to a grocery list. I need groceries. I need groceries. You don't actually need to say the second part of this, right? This colon here. You could just say, I need groceries, and a person could go and get you groceries. But if you list your groceries, I need groceries, carrots, you see? Peas, you see? Tomatoes, you see? I could say flapjacks, colon, furthermore, syrup. That's it. That's all I need, right? So again, it sort of sets up a list and it helps clarify what's happening in the first thing. I need groceries. Here's what I need from the groceries. Okay, so that's commas, semicolons, and colons. When you get to an O, it's sort of like a wild card, okay? This is why I love O's, is they're pure emotion. You know, you think about cavemen, when they were performing or saying things, they would just go, oh, they just have that, you know, ooh, ooh, ah, ah. All they had to communicate with was vowels, presumably. I wasn't there. But the main idea that I'm getting here is whatever Romeo is feeling, it is my lady, oh, it is my love. There's a comma, and O's almost always come with a comma because they are an idea by themselves. And when you get to more than one O, you start to build a list of them. And every time that you repeat a word in Shakespeare, it gets more important. So we get 1, 2, 3 O's. That's huge. That last O is huge. It doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be the most important O in the entire piece. So, oh, it is my love. He could be sad. It is my lady. Oh, it is my love. And he's sad because she'll never know. Oh, he says that right here. oh, that she knew she were. That second O becomes way worse. And then the last one, he's sad, oh, that I were a glove upon that hand. He so desires to be with Juliet, but he can't be with her. So the O is a wild card of emotion. You can be happy, sad, angry, whatever it is, but it needs to make sense, and you need to be able to justify it. And then just really quickly with things like parentheses or hyphens, technically a hyphen or a parentheses can act the same as a comma. So you won't see those in Shakespeare, but when you see them in other texts, they act the same way. They have different intention, but the way that you perform them is essentially the same. So if I had something in hyphen, I could say, arise, fair sun, because I've already called her the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon. Or I could put that in hyphens instead. Oh, I could go, arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon. Again, it just is different. And I could technically put that in quotation marks because I've named her the sun. Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon. So again, commas equal all of those different pieces of punctuation. And yes, there are different pieces of punctuation that I haven't touched on here, but these are our major ones that you're going to see in most text. And we're going to go on to the very end here, but one of the things I want to say that's really important is that other writers are going to have their own way of building punctuation in, like slashes and things like that. And typically in modern texts, they have those as rules. But these, the understanding of punctuation that you've gained from this should help you be able to interpret how those writers have created their text. So again, just as it was before, you're going to take the punctuation and replace it with the appropriate phrasing. And once you understand how the pieces link together, again, return to that original punctuation without those training wheels and perform that text. It's really important that you remember that you let the end of your sentence be the final thought, and that periods, question marks, and exclamation points are what you're driving towards. And enjoy working on